Hello, everyone. Regardless of who you are in the beer industry, Guinness Draft is one of those beers we've all had and respect. Guinness has been around over 260 years, and Guinness, as you'll learn, is much, much more than that one beer. Today, joined by Guinness Brewery Ambassador Jimmy Callahan. Jimmy, how's it going?
It's going well, Andrew. Thanks for having me. This is really a lot of fun.
Where in the world are you, Jimmy?
I'm based out of Chicago. I'm one of our four ambassadors for the United States, and I have 15 states I cover, and our whole job is basically to educate people about Guinness. So we train our sales staff, we train bar staff, we train distributor staff, um, we do consumer events, and we also are experts in dispense. So for troubleshooting with draft systems in regards to Guinness and all the beers that we have. So it's pretty fun. I get to go around and talk to people about beer and tell the Guinness stories, and then there are a lot of them. So it's a pretty good gig.
Sounds like a great gig. Now, what is your first Guinness memory?
Um, I feel like because I have the job I have, I should have a better answer for this. But the first time I ever came across Guinness was in college, and my experience with beer up until that point was just light lagers, kegs and stuff at college parties and that sort of thing. And somebody was like, "Oh, here, you got to here's a pint of the black stuff because my name is Jimmy Callahan, so obviously, like, I should just be drinking Guinness."
You
And
were
so
born drinking Guinness.
I hadn't at that time. I wasn't like a big. I always drink responsibly, 21 and over. I wasn't like a big beer drinker at that point. But it was very unique. It was unlike anything I'd tasted before because up until that point, you know, those like the common phrase is like, "Oh, beer's an acquired taste." But if you're drinking crappy beer, it's like I don't want to be acquired to that taste of crap. So my first experience with that was like in college, and then I came to have a real strong appreciation of it when I actually did this play called Flanagan's Wake, which was an interactive comedy, and it was the whole idea was that the audience is coming to Ireland because their ancestor Flanagan died, and so it was then that I really fell in love with Guinness for the beer that it is and the culture and the brand itself. So I was a little bit late of a bloomer as far as my Guinness experience goes.
So you wear two hats in the world. You work for Guinness, but you're also a pretty successful actor, I hear.
Yeah, I've been lucky in my career. So I started off in stand up and improv. I'm very funny, obviously, and then I kind of fell into commercial work, and so I've done over 100 commercials and a lot of TV and film stuff, and still do that when time allows. But I've been able to be fortunate enough to have this job with Guinness for now. I'm in my sixth year as one of our ambassadors. So a lot of it's all performance, really. It's all education and entertainment, and hopefully entertainment, but education, trying to engage people and have conversation, have a new connection, really. So they're not that dissimilar, honestly.
How do you balance your time between both positions that you hold in your life?
Well, family comes first. I've got three kids, 8, 5, and 2-year-old. So my wife and I, especially as I'm sure you understand, in the pandemic times, it's been pretty challenging the past couple of years, but we've made it work, bouncing them around and everything. But family comes first, and then Guinness is my priority as far as my employment is concerned. And then if I can fit in some acting stuff on the side, I kind of equate it to people have full time jobs, but then they train for marathons. When do you find the time for that? You gotta pick and choose sometimes when you can do your pleasure projects, passion projects rather.
Has Guinness ever utilized your services in any of their commercials?
Not like network commercials, but I do a lot of social media stuff, and so a lot of things for Instagram and that sort of thing, and training videos. Yeah, I get to do a little bit of that too.
That's actually a really great similarity there because, when people are watching training videos, you don't want to watch that boring training video that was made 30 years ago and the dry, dull person just going over fact after fact. So when you're talking training, Jimmy, how do you make it interesting? Because obviously, you're a comedian. It's going to be funny by default. But, what are the tips and tricks that you put in there to kind of get people excited about the experience of training someone on beer?
Well, I think it starts with if you don't believe in what you're saying and you don't feel confident in what you're saying, if you don't have a passion for what you're saying, then why would anyone want to listen to you? You know, like why are you there? As far as if it's a video or if it's a training, could this have been an email? You know, you never want someone to say, this is a waste of my time. So I like to try to give people information that they might not have had before, or reimagine the information that they already know in a new way. I like to try to engage people, so you ask questions, so make it more interactive and casual. I try not to speak in corporate terms, so I avoid bandwidth and circle back and land this plane as much as possible, because just use words that mean things, and have at least try to have a sense of humor about it. So be open to new things. So I guess if I can put the feather in my cap of why I could be successful doing these presentations, is that I don't really ever have a script. I know the information, and then I have an objective, and how I get to that objective, it's different every time. So it keeps things fresh for me, keeps things fresh for the audience, hopefully.
So what types of trainings do you host yourself?
Well, I've done, especially the past couple of years, where so much has been virtual, and we haven't been able to get out to the bar, the pub as much, or the bar as much, to do beer dinners, that sort of thing, or whatever. I started doing Facebook Live Guinness happy hours, where I picked a new topic every week and invited people to come and join and learn about beer, learn about Guinness, and have some fun, just have some human connection as well.
I think we're all craving that.
Yeah, right. And so then we've really amped up our social media presence, all the ambassadors on Instagram. So we do different, it's the same platform, but we do different like little micro shows. And then I've done some longer video content, just to dispel some myths and misperceptions about Guinness, and educate people in lieu of being there in person.
Well, you've set yourself up for that one. What's a myth you'd like to dispel right now?
I think the biggest myth that persists in the United States is that Guinness is that creamy pint of nitrogenated stout that you get at the pub, and that's all it's ever been. And Arthur Guinness was making that in 1759, and that's what Guinness is. When in reality, Guinness started in 1759, but it wasn't until 1959 that we invented this whole concept of nitrogenation, when we tried to put our Guinness extra stout on draft. So up until then, and this does blow my mind actually, but up until then, up until the 1950s, we were maturing beer in huge wooden vats, and it depended on where the beer was going, the distance from where it was traveling from the brewery to its final location, how much the hop content and the alcohol content of the beer was, because this is before refrigeration, this is before pasteurization, this is before electricity, this is before our country was founded. So we would brew what was called a Dublin porter for the town of Dublin, and then we would brew a country porter, which was a slightly higher alcohol hop content, and then we would brew a West Indies porter for journeys over the seas. And so that beer was north of 7.5%. Like at times it was all the way up to like 9-10% beer, to survive the journey, so it didn't spoil. But we never canned, kegged, or bottled our own beer until we invented draft. So we would just send those barrels around the world. We put into casks, send those casks around Ireland, around the world, and the local publicans would then either bottle their own beer or pull it directly from the cask. And we became the biggest brewery in the world just doing this, without advertising, without slapping our name on the bottle or a can or whatever. And we were shipping beer all the way to New Zealand by like 1858, like probably the furthest point in the globe. So Guinness Draft, when it came about, really took over certain countries in the world, but for the most part, if you're drinking Guinness around the world, around the globe, you're drinking foreign extra stout or extra stout, which are the descendants of those beers I mentioned before. So a lot of people think like, Guinness Draft is all that we do, but we make lagers, we make ales, we make different varieties of stout. It's not just one brewery, not just one beer, it's a brewery. So that's the biggest one. And I think that was a very long answer.
Well, it was really informative. And I live, in Virginia, not terribly far, probably 4 hours from your Baltimore brewery. And I can't wait to make that trip up and experience everything you have. It's good. I've heard it's a beautiful facility.
It's awesome. They have done just an incredible job of continuing the Guinness legacy in the United States. So we had brewed beer in the U.S. before. It was first exported in 1817 to the U.S. And that would have been for an extra stout. It wouldn't have been, draft was not invented at that time. So we would have had foreign extra stout coming to the United States all the way till Prohibition, put a halt to all that. And then World War II. And so we lost a few generations of beer drinkers. And then we eventually, got back into the game, and we're sending extra stout here. We actually broke up a brewery in New York on Long Island. We're trying to bring dark beer back into the United States, but it took a while for things to get going. And then finally draft was what helped us like chip away at the US there. But yeah, so as far as the Baltimore brewery goes, it's our first purposely built brewery for the United States. And we have all American brewers. We have some very, very talented, well-respected people at the helm. And we're doing everything from lagers, like, we have a salt and lime lager that's made its way around the country. I'm sorry, ales. That's salt and lime ale. But we've had different lagers. We have barrel-aged beers, some of which have made it around the country in like LTOs, limited time offer, which are like bigger beers like this Imperial Stout aged in bourbon barrels. So they've brewed over 250 unique beers in the 4 years we've been open. Yeah. So tons of stuff. Some of the stuff is just meant to be for the tap room, just to experiment, to have fun, to express their creative energy. And then other stuff like our Baltimore Blonde is the flagship beer coming out of there that will make its way to the rest of the country as well. So great food there. There's a lot of history with the building, the facility. It used to be an old whiskey distillery that is also part of the Guinness Diageo company. So it's definitely worth your trip, and you will have some amazing beer.
I will let you know how that goes. So looking at what you brew in Baltimore versus what you brew abroad, how does that differ? Do you see certain unique styles being produced strictly for a United States audience? Or I'd love to learn a little bit more about how it differs between what you're brewing in Ireland versus, here in the States.
Sure. It can be very different, but there's a lot of through lines as well. So as I said, it's all American brewers. So it's not like the decision is pretty much theirs as far as what they're going to brew for the Baltimore facility. And Dublin is doing what Dublin is. So we have Guinness Draft and Extra Stout and Foreign Extra Stout, Smedix, Harp, all the beers that Dublin produces, we have at the Baltimore brewery as well. And then we have our core Baltimore beers, and then we have experimental beers that they do. So how they differ, the Irish especially are, I don't want to sound like disparaging when I say this, but they are years ahead of us as far as quality and consistency goes with draft systems, because there's no 3-tier system there, though. So, we have full access to the beer and can make sure that everything is as the brewer intended it. But like most European countries, they're really looking to the United States as far as creativity goes and innovation and classic styles and maybe doing something different. So I think that's where they differ. But the Dublin brewers also is supremely talented. We have more master brewers in Dublin than any other brewery. So they are doing. We have the pilot brewery there called the Open Gate Brewery, and they're doing a very similar thing. So barrel aging beer, doing unique styles of beer. So they're catching up in that regard, and we're trying to catch up in the quality and make sure that you have a good pint every single time you order one. And we also are using the Guinness yeast and roasted barley from Dublin. So that's one thing that really sets Guinness apart. Yeast comprises up to 78% of the flavor of a beer, and we have a very unique strain of yeast that no one else has. So you literally can't find something that tastes like a Guinness because you don't have that DNA of the beer, the yeast that we use. And so we're shipping that yeast all around the world we brew in over 50 countries around the world, not just in the United States, not just in Dublin. And so that yeast gets sent around the world to maintain consistency in that flavor profile, as well as roasted barley, which is only done at the Dublin St. James's Gate Brewery. So we roast barley there basically every day, all year round. And that barley is then sent around the world to basically have like a piece of Dublin in most of our beers. So even some of the like the ales and the lagers that we're brewing in Baltimore, they're predominantly using Guinness yeast. But then we also do use harp yeast and Smithwick's yeast, but they all have a little bit of roasted barley in there to have like a piece of Dublin, if not for anything else symbolically.
That's fascinating. And, I want to dive more into the innovation component of what you all at Guinness are doing right now. And what I'm drinking right now, I'm actually drinking the Guinness Zero, which is a fantastic beer. I've dove deep into the NA segment. And, when I first got this, I love it. I did a side-by-side with Guinness Zero. And, do you refer to the alcoholic version as the leaded version? It's like there's not a consensus. Like I had Guinness with 0% alcohol and Guinness with typical alcohol. How do you verbally refer to one versus the other?
So far, there hasn't been a distinction other than Guinness Draft and Guinness Zero. So we're just trying to keep it simple, and with the implication being that if you're saying it's Guinness Draft, then that it has alcohol in it. The really amazing thing about this beer, though, is that it isn't brewed like other NA beers, which oftentimes it's brewed to be non-alcoholic. So it's not really brewed. There isn't really ever yeast introduced into the process. And so you basically just have like a cereal water that kind of tastes like a lager usually. Usually it's like try to go after like a light beer or a lager as far as the flavor profile goes with an NA. With this, we're not doing that. We're brewing Guinness Draft, same exact process, same beer. And then through like a filtration system, almost like an RO membrane. That membrane traps the alcohol molecules because they're bigger than the rest of the molecules in the beer, and the rest of it goes through. So meaning that you get all the flavor of a Guinness Draft, it's just minus the alcohol content. So you get that roastiness, you get the chocolate and coffee and toffee. You just don't get the heat of the alcohol. So some people still say like, oh, it's pretty good, but doesn't taste exactly the same. It's like, well, there is an alcohol in it, so it's not going to taste 100% the same, but it's pretty darn great. And so it's an excellent option if for whatever reason, if you're you just didn't want to have a drink, or you don't consume alcohol, or you're the designated driver, or you just you're watching a soccer game or a football game at 10 in the morning and you're not quite ready to have a beer at that point. So we're really proud of it. And it's been taken off. We because of supply chain stuff and materials, we are now finally getting it where it's nationwide. Before we had some target markets, so now we're seeing it really expand, and it's doing really well for us, and a nice alternative to your pint of Guinness.
In addition to running Crappy Professionals, I'm also part of several non-alcoholic beer groups. And it seemed like when you first released it in the United States, every other picture in these groups was someone finding it in their local supermarket or, package store. And people got very, very excited about it. But looking back a little bit farther, how did it come to be? At what point did you decide, what, we need to make an NA version of this?
Well, I think Diageo is always about, Guinness being Diageo, always about responsible drinking and enjoying our beers or spirits, but in a healthy manner, responsible manner. So we've had different NA beers before. So like Caliber has been in our portfolio. And even I'm not saying that Guinness Draft is a health focused beer. I'm not saying that at all, but we don't really, all of our beers are very well balanced. And usually that includes like the alcohol content. So, Guinness Draft is only 4.2%. It's only 125 calories per 12 ounces. So it's actually, in effect, like one of the lightest beers you could drink, but it just has a lot more flavor. So as far as like the getting into the NA game with Guinness, I think it was more so of understanding that we had the technology to do it and then executing it. So we're always looking for new avenues to give people options when they're consuming beverages. And also at the forefront, we are a company of innovation. From the very beginning, Arthur Guinness helped create the whole category of an Irish dry stout, going from porters to a stouter porter, a stronger porter, and creating an Irish dry stout, to the world's first export stouts, to different packaging and other brewing technology that we've helped invent, notwithstanding the invention of Guinness nitrogenation. So this is just the latest thing, or one of the latest things, as far as our history of innovation goes, and trying to provide people with different options for different occasions.
Very cool. Do you plan to do any other Guinness branded NA beers?
I don't, to my knowledge, I don't know of any in the pipeline, but we're certainly open to those opportunities, because if we could do it with Guinness Draft, like, why couldn't we do it with our other beers? If there's a market for it and we feel like we can create a quality product, then it's certainly on the table.
That is a very good answer on that one, Jimmy. Now, looking at all the limited offerings you've put out in 2022, what have been the winners, and what are those you've learned some lessons from?
Well, I started off by saying that biggest myth that Guinness is just one beer. Guinness is, Guinness Draft, and it's funny to me because it's like a parent who's like, we had this one kid, and we love him or her. We can't have any other kids. We can't spread our love at all to anyone else. It's like, I like pizza. That's all I'm going to eat forever. It's like we make Guinness Draft, but it wasn't our first beer. It won't be our last beer. And so this whole idea of like, what's Guinness doing? Like, leave Guinness alone and blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's not going anywhere. Like, Guinness Draft is going to be there. It is a staple. We're very proud of it. But that doesn't mean that we can't continue to create, because if we didn't continue to create, Guinness Draft wouldn't even be a thing. We still bring porters in Dublin and never have gone off the island. So this whole notion that we should stick in our lane and stuff, it's like, well, we go in many different directions. So when it comes to different innovation products and beers that we've made, the hurdle that we come up against is trying to get people to open up their minds to something beyond what they love and know as Guinness Draft. Like, when it comes to like our LTOs, like the holiday offerings, like we've had that, we're gonna go there. Our barrel aged beers coming out of Baltimore. We had an Imperial Stout. We had a chocolate mint stout. We have a gingerbread barrel aged stout. And these have been wildly successful. Some people get them just as collector's items. Some people, get them and give us presents. But they're really, really well done beers. I'm sure that you've had your fair share of barrel-aged beers as the popularity of that style has really taken off the past 10 years or so. And some of them are really amazing, and some of them taste like motor oil. And it can be a little bit hit or miss. And what I'm really proud of with our brewers is that they still maintain that sense of balance, whether or not they're doing an Italian Pilsner or they're doing an 11.3% chocolate mint stout that doesn't taste like 11.3%. There's a balance within the beer. So some of those beers have been really, really successful. We've had some other beers that maybe we came out a little bit too early with almost ripping the Band-Aid off, like, oh, this is what a Guinness looks like to you? Well, how about a nitrogenated IPA? And people are like, what are you doing? They didn't understand where we're coming from. So now that we have the Baltimore Brewery open up for 4 years, now that we have our Chicago tap room, which is opening up next year at some point, people are open to the idea that Guinness can brew different things. So, but some of the beers that they've made have been incredible. We just had like the Salt and Lime Ale is like an awesome summertime beer. It's made around part of the country. We had a Belgian wit beer that's phenomenal, that really has taken a hold at the brewery. And then, I don't know. I want to take my company hat off, but it's still the same. Like, I have not tasted a bad beer from our brewers out of the hundreds that they've brewed.
I believe that.
I haven't tasted one where it's like gross. Like, everything is done purposefully and for a reason, and they're very, very tempting.
So let's dive into that Salt and Lime Ale for a minute, because you mentioned people sometimes think that Guinness is just one beer, and that's obviously not the case. So when you put Salt and Lime Ale on the shelves, how do you teach people through your marketing that this is an option for them?
Yeah, well, some of it is actually just like grassroots marketing, where we're at festivals and we are at professional beer events where we just want to get people to try the beer. Because there's no better way to win over somebody than having them taste the beer instead of having some preconceived notions and oh, am I going to spend the money on a 6-pack when I'm not sure what to expect? So the most success we have is really just getting the beer in front of people and having them taste it, and so we can explain to them hey, this is available and that sort of thing. So, but with those sorts of releases, though, they're usually going to like bigger liquor stores, bigger chains, and people they see the Guinness name, and so luckily we have some really good
name recognition there.
Yeah, we're lucky to have a name that people recognize, and it's like, oh, interesting. I'll try that. So. It's a smattering of a lot of different things, and obviously social media is incredibly important with trying to get out and get the message out. So we'll do some live tastings. We had Brewery Ambassador from the brewery, and then we also have one of our other ambassadors, Mike Reardon in Boston, does a weekly show, Coast to Coast Guinness Toast on Instagram. You can follow him at About the Stout. And we'll do stuff on there all the time, like tasting new beers and that sort of thing.
Very cool. You mentioned, Guinness has such name recognition. And, when I think of Guinness, I also think of the Guinness Book of World Records. And, until a couple of hours ago, I assumed in my mind there was some relationship, but I didn't actually dive into it. Do you know about that story?
I do. I'll back up just a couple decades earlier. So I mentioned at the beginning that we didn't advertise for the longest time. So it was just word of mouth. Quality and consistency of the beer just spoke for itself. We started to advertise in 1929. That was the first time we ever took out a full page ad. And it basically said, because of quality and quality alone, we become the biggest brewery by far in the world.
I mean, that's 150 years of no advertising.
It's nuts, right? And just putting beer into wooden barrels and sending them around the world. So once we did start this relationship, shall we say, with advertising, we wanted the quality of the advertising to match the quality of the beer. So the golden age of Guinness advertising really started in the 1930s and then up to the 1950s, where we have these images of where did that bottle go? Sorry, we call her Gilroy art. So it's named after a man by the name of John Gilroy, who was a very talented portrait artist, but he worked for the advertising company we used in London called S.H. Benson. And he's responsible for coming up with these campaigns like Guinness is good for you, Guinness for strength. Because he just went around and asked people, like, why are you drinking Guinness? Because everyone was. And they were like, makes me feel good. Little did they know it wasn't a health tonic. It was a beer. And they were, feeling good because of that. So he's also responsible for those, what we call the Guinness menagerie of animals, like the toucan and the ostrich and pelican line. The idea being that the zookeeper was having his Guinness stolen by these animals and he's trying to track it down or whatever. So these campaigns, like we found a lot of success with them because it brought a sense of whimsy and a sense of fun to the brand. Hugh Beaver was our director of marketing. I don't know when he started, but in the 1950s, as we're approaching the bicentennial, he was responsible for a lot of creative and wacky promotions, shall we say. So he did what's called the Great Guinness Bottle Drop, a few different ones all around the world, where we basically dropped 50,000, 100,000 embossed bottles. They had a message in a bottle for Guinness, and they just floated around the ocean, and people are still discovering them today. I don't think we'll try that again for obvious reasons. But along with that, 1955, Hugh Beaver, the director of marketing, was he was having an argument with his buddy, as guys tend to do, about the fastest game bird when you're hunting. And so they were arguing back and forth, and he got this idea. He's like, there should be a book behind every bar to settle these stupid bar disputes. So he got a advertising company to compile a list of facts and figures all around the world: the tallest this, the fastest this, the country with the most this, blah blah blah, and it became the Guinness Book of World Records. And at first it was just an advertising thing. So it was given to pubs around England, around Ireland, and it was just to settle bar disputes and something for fun for people to flip through. That's what it started out as, and then eventually it became the second largest book in print in the world behind the Bible, and
Wow.
Which is nuts. And then so it definitely came from Guinness. It was part of our, it was our invention. And then eventually sold the rights to it in like the 1980s. So it's no longer owned by Guinness, but it did start with Guinness.
And it still has your name on it.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite world records in that book?
Oh man, as a kid, when I first saw it, it's like in your classroom, you'll see like I was fascinated by the dudes with the long fingernails, where it's like curling around and like feet, it's like foot long or like a few feet long or whatever. I'm like, why? Like it was just so bizarre to me. Then you invariably you think about how they do like day-to-day activities and stuff, and I'm like, it was just like seeing an image of that. So that's the one that made the most
Impact
on me, like the biggest impression. But I can't pull off like a specific one, or like obviously like the tallest guy or like the shortest person in the world. You're like, what? They're 18 inches tall or something. It's pretty crazy.
It's all fascinating. It's right. When you're having a pint of Guinness, to have that kind of trivia, and I've always been like a Jeopardy person, Trivial Pursuit, Guinness World Book of Records. I love having that knowledge just available for you, just to know it's there. It's neat to have.
It's fun to know like a little bit about a lot of things. So at least you can have the conversation.
100%. So I was, doing a little bit of Googling today, and I saw that in 2021, there was a football fan from North Carolina who broke a Guinness World Book of Records by attending home games for all 32 NFL teams in 74 days, which I thought was pretty cool and pretty impressive. And I know, right? It's a lot of football.
Yeah, that is a lot of football, a lot of money.
Oh yeah, I don't know who funded it, but he definitely had a nice little vacation there. But looking at the upcoming football season, does Guinness have any neat tie-ins?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. So we've really amped up our football presence the past couple of years. So we have a partnership with Joe Montana and also with Notre Dame for their college football fans, which is just a pretty much a no-brainer, like Guinness and Notre Dame and whatever. So we've got a great partnership with them. But it's not just college football. We had our first Super Bowl commercial last year. That got a lot of attention, which is great. So we plan to be involved with your Saturday and your Sunday football from the beginning of the season all the way to the Super Bowl. So you'll see us out there, and you'll see our beers out there as well.
Are we going to see any animals in that commercial?
I don't know what we have in store for this upcoming Super Bowl, but if there's still ideas being floated around, it's never a bad idea to incorporate the stuff that people know and love.
Absolutely. So, you've already talked a bit about Baltimore, but you suddenly mentioned that there's going to be a new location in Chicago. When do we expect that to open, and what can we expect from it?
Yeah. Well, it's a building that we found. It's on the near northwest side of Chicago in the Fulton Market District. It's an awesome location. It's nearby a bunch of different like really amazing like restaurant spots and nightlife spots, but it will be like uniquely Guinness. But that being said, it's a building that needs a lot of work. So I don't have a specific date for you, just other than it's going to be in 2023. Initially, we were hoping for perhaps to have something around St. Patrick's Day, but I think that's probably pushing it. But shortly after, we should have beer being poured there, and we'll have stuff from Dublin. We'll still be importing Guinness Draft and the staples from there. We'll have some beer being shipped over from Baltimore, and then we'll brew beer specifically for the Chicago market as well. It'll be a smaller brewery than the Baltimore Brewery. It's a 10-barrel system, so we have the capacity there to brew specifically for that tap room, and then we'll be bringing beer from the other two sources as well. So we'll have food there. I'm very excited about it. It'll be in my in my backyard, and excited to have Chicago. I think is the natural fit for the next expansion. There's a huge Guinness. There's a big love for Guinness in this community, and then all the people in the Midwest who can't make it to Baltimore, you've got an easier destination.
I always enjoy visiting Chicago. Last time I visited, it got to 0 degrees, and I was lucky that day it was not windy, but it was definitely a good time.
Yeah. It's the winters make you appreciate the summers. That's what they say.
So, a lot of good food in Chicago too. And when you're talking, having a pint of Guinness and like the perfect pairing, let's talk pizza for a sec. Chicago is pretty well known for pizza. What type of pizza or topping in particular do you prefer with your Guinness? Pint of Guinness Draft, I should say. Or unless you have another Guinness you'd like to throw in the mix,
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Guinness Extra Stout and Foreign Extra Stout. I've got all these bottles here down beneath me or whatever. But so Guinness Extra Stout, it's a beer that that people, like, you might see it at the grocery store, at the liquor store, and pass by it thinking that it's exactly the same as Guinness Draft, just different package or something. Or if you see this yellow label, Guinness Foreign Extra Stout. But this beer is such an amazing combation of flavors. It's the beer that we put on draft to create Guinness Draft, and so the difference is that it's not nitrogenated. There isn't those nitrogen bubbles in the beer. It's just all CO2. So what happens is nitrogen bubbles actually, like with that creamy texture, actually soften the bitterness a bit. And so with Guinness Extra Stout, those bubbles aren't present. It's just the CO2. So the flavors, the aromas really explode out of the beer. So everything's amplified a bit. You get more roastiness. You get more of that chocolate toffee coffee flavor. You get more bitterness in the back end. So so this beer is great for a lot of different things. If you think like through lines with like roastiness and like caramelization, just off the top of my head, like I would go with like a caramelized onion pizza with like caramelized onion sausage. I think that would be really great. But anything that has like that browning effect, like the Maillard reaction, so like some nice, like not charred, but
what's the name of that reaction you just said?
Maillard reaction, how do you spell it? Maillard. It's essentially the browning of food, so like roasting barley, roasting coffee, searing a steak, that charring effect, that browning effect that releases different compounds in the food or in the beverage. Anytime you can like have some through lines with that, you're pretty good for a good food pairing. So like for desserts, Guinness and chocolate, because of those dark like roasted notes with the beer, and especially a dark chocolate or super on point. With as far as like mains, I mean, okay, so I didn't mean to like skirt the answer to your question, but for pizza, we have we're famous for the Chicago Italian beef. So you can actually get basically like a beef pizza with hot giardiniera on it and everything too. That's not something I get every time, but I've had it along with Guinness, and it's pretty darn incredible. But short ribs, Guinness is great to not only to pair with food, but also to use in the food. So I know a lot of people who not even knowing that I work for Guinness, they've said like, oh yeah, I use Guinness whenever I grill, like as a marinade, So pork is great because the sweetness of the pork, chili and stew. It's just it adds a robustness to the food that you can't get with other beers. So there aren't really. It's a very versatile beer. There aren't a lot of things that it doesn't go well with.
You're making me kind of hungry right now. It's getting close to dinner time here in the East Coast. I think I might need to walk to my favorite pizza place with my family right now and try some of these pairings you suggested.
Yeah. I mean, you can't go wrong.
So, Jimmy, looking ahead to 2022, the rest of the year and beyond, what are you most excited about?
Well, I'm certainly excited about the new brewery in Chicago, the new tap room. And I mean, honestly, like we get insight into some things that are upcoming, but I'm constantly surprised at some of the things that we're able to achieve, not only with beers, but like new partnerships and reaching new audiences and stuff. So I'm excited that we're able to go out and hopefully, like everyone being safe and vaccinated and taking care of themselves, go out and see each other again and share pints of Guinness with your family and friends. And for me, I get to go around and travel and meet new people, talk to people, and see old friends. And that's really what Guinness is all about. It's always been about community. It's about that sense of being at the pub and not just on your phone, but having a conversation and just like that experience of what we call crack, which is CRAIC. It basically is like an Irish word for like the liveliness, like what's the energy of the night, And so I'm looking forward to some good crack.
That sounds like a good time. And for me, Guinness also pairs very nicely with travel. I remember my first Guinness in Dublin at the top, the Guinness Draft at the top of that beautiful facility. And, some people say that's the best Guinness you'll ever have. And of course it's going to be fantastic because the view is amazing. You're at somewhere abroad and it's a great time. So for you, outside of being at that same spot, which I imagine you probably had a beer at before, where's your favorite place to have one of your Guinness beers?
So in like abroad, outside of
anywhere in the world,
anywhere
in the world,
man. Well, I mean, so the politician's answer will be anywhere with good ambiance and a person who knows how to pour a proper pint of Guinness. And fortunately for me, in and around Chicago and my territory, all the states I cover, there's no shortage of amazing bars that have just a great pint of Guinness. But that being said, also when I've had the fortune to go to Ireland, my favorite, I'm not going to say a specific bar, but like the moments that come to mind are the ones where you get like a list, like, oh, when you go to Dublin or you go to Galway, you got to hit up this bar, or whatever. That's where they pour the perfect pint of Guinness. But my favorite moments were like just like the small little unassuming bar that little pub that wasn't like on everyone's radar, but it was just like what Guinness is all about. There's an Irishman or an Irish woman behind the bar who's probably been doing it for 20, 30 years, just taking the care and the craft, chatting you up, seeing where you're from, and just being able to like relax in such a quintessential environment. Like that's my favorite place to enjoy a pint. Like going back to the beauty of the simplicity of it. Just like when's the last time you had a good Guinness? It's something that I crave. It's great.
I love it. And that experience that goes with the beer definitely makes it better.
Yeah.
Well, Jimmy, it's been fun today learning more about Guinness and having you. So I appreciate the time. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Always drink responsibly. Please enjoy a Guinness when you get a chance, and have fun out there. Go out and meet your friends at the pub, and have one of you drive drinking Guinness Zero. So be safe out there.
It's a good one. Well, Jimmy, I hope to have beer someday, and cheers and have a good one.
Sounds good. Thanks very much for having me.